We get the chance to see updates on 3 of the 4 emperors in this chapter, acting as our sort of global update as we move between Egghead into Elbaf, and there's some serious conflict going down in this chapter.
Yeah, got some plotting, and most importantly, a mystery that might lead us into our first objective on the Land of Giants. But we'll start with another mystery first, which is in the cover series with Yamato.
And as Yamato has continued her travels into Kuri, it seems that more than just Minatomo has gone missing in this region. And in this installment, Yamato learns that some girls in the area have also gone missing, according to this woman that she speaks to at the soba shop.
Yeah, so it seems like we were wrong when we thought this might be a quick thing. It seems like there's actually something bigger going on here, and there may be a kidnapper or multiple kidnappers on the loose.
And it could easily play back into what we saw 2 installments ago with Yamato, where she chased off a kidnapper trying to kidnap a woman. But I have a feeling it's probably not just one individual and that there's a bigger problem going on here. But we're only going to find out more when we get more of the cover series. For now, let's take a look at the chapter itself, starting with the title being Taking Responsibility.
Yeah, and this is a very fitting title, considering the focus that we get on the Yonko in this chapter.
Absolutely. I mean, it is the highest title of respect you can hold on the seas as a pirate. So we get to see some instances of not only the Yonko crew taking responsibility for their captain's namesake, but also taking responsibility for when you go against a Yonko and it does not go very well.
Yeah, and we start the chapter on page 1 with a bit of background regarding how Dory and Bragi even ended up on Egghead in the first place. And it turns out it's all thanks to Oimo and Kashi learning of their whereabouts from Usopp, which we kind of expected.
Yeah, it was kind of up in the air whether or not they were going to go see them eventually, or like whether they were going to go back to Elbaf at first. But when they finally made it to Little Garden, they found them just brawling, essentially bare-fisted without their weapons, because they did use them to destroy the Island Eater that the Straw Hats were sailing into the mouth of.
And ironically, they do say that they're just taking a break to go back to Elbaf with the rest of their crew so that they can get more weapons and continue their fight.
It's their warrior spirit. It's why Usopp kind of looks up to them in the first place, but Nami's not in the same camp, and hearing that and just being like, oh, you're still fighting, you didn't learn your lesson, it's enough for her to start drinking right away.
Yeah, and this was also a good precursor to what was going to happen later in the chapter, with them telling them this is absinthe, the green fairy, and it could cause you to hallucinate if you drink too much.
And you have to keep in mind, if it could cause hallucinations for giants,
it will for the Straw Hats.
Normal people have to just be getting wasted on this stuff.
Zoro will be fine.
Zoro and Jinbei are probably fine, that's true. But with this celebration underway, we also do kind of get a very wholesome couple of panels of Straw Hats and giant warrior pirates celebrating together. And it's honestly kind of nice to take a breath after what was just non-stop chaos on Egghead.
Yeah, and then we also get to see just a beautiful reunion between Kuma and Bonney, who's still in her child form. And I just love it. Finally reunited with her dad and exploring the seas like they always dreamed of together.
It's also just the fact that it's such a simple goal, but it was so hard for them to get to the point where they're like, wow, we found the horizon together. And you're right, every single time I see Kuma's face just with a slight smile, my whole heart is just filled with joy. He deserves all of this and more.
Absolutely. Also just happy for Bonney to get this reuniting. Yeah, the vibes couldn't be better than they are right now on the Straw Hat crew. But moving from the sea to the land, we jump to the incident that we knew occurred just a little over a month ago, where Bardo burned the flag of Shanks.
And we do get a name for this island being the Gartel Island in the New World. But they also point out the fact that by burning Shanks' flag, this is just a straight slight at an emperor, essentially, and it doesn't take long for an emperor like Shanks to take notice of something like this, and we see now that Bardo is just held captive while explaining the significance of the crime that he committed.
Yeah, and I mean, Shanks is right. He has a lot of weak that depend on his flag for protection, so burning it puts them in danger.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw some of the members of Shanks' fleet when Kid was trying to attack them, And his logic is sound. Those weaker members are going to be in a lot greater danger if he isn't harsh on people that straight up give affront to his name and his reputation. And if he's lenient with that, I don't know how well they're going to be protected. And it seems like Bartolomeo understands that logic as well as a pirate.
Yeah, and this is where we get the chapter title, In Taking Responsibility, as Bardo does do that. He apologizes, says it was a mistake, we weren't thinking, please forgive us, begs for mercy.
And it seems like Shanks ponders giving him forgiveness, but his crew definitely takes more action than him in this chapter, as Hongo, somebody who's not as named but was named recently in one of the SPSs, presents him with a vial of poison and tells him that he needs to give this to Luffy within the month to take it, so that his boss can take responsibility for his actions.
Yeah, and honestly, shout out to Bardo, because he doesn't waste any time, just takes a quick look at it, takes it himself.
They also, they take the time to describe that it's like, this is a brutal death. You will have blood explode out of you, essentially. And he takes responsibility for his actions, but he's not going to give it to Luffy, obviously.
Yeah, and obviously his crew is shocked, but we all knew that he was going to do this. He's the most loyal guy in the entire story, to Luffy specifically. And, the only thing that would hold him back is the fact he won't be able to see him become Pirate King.
Yeah, I honestly think more of the question that is posed by this is, did Shanks really want to assassinate Luffy in this way? And, was he okay with letting his crew try to do this? It feels kind of doubtful from what we find out about the poison later on, but Shanks is acting way more cold in the final saga, and it seems like the closer we get to the final island, the closer we get to the real identity of who this man is.
Yeah, but as Bardo's sitting there expecting to die, he just kind of doesn't, just burps and sits there. And then we jump to the next panel, and they're just sailing off.
Yeah, it seems like they themselves are dumbfounded by the fact that one of the emperors could be so soft, as they put it. And if he does change his mind, he could very easily kill them at any moment.
Yep, and we do see that, because first we see both Shanks and Beckman kind of just smiling and enjoying the fact that Luffy really does have all of these loyal followers. And then, out of nowhere, comes Yasopp.
Yasopp takes responsibility in his own way. I think he understands the soft sentiment Beckman and Shanks are sharing, but this is business, and he's not going to let that slide so easily. He's not going to let his captain get disrespected like that.
Still gotta teach him a lesson.
And he just asked Shanks to move before blowing Bardo and his crew to smithereens.
Yeah.
Tragically.
Yeah, and one shot, too, from a good distance. So it's, did he hit a powder keg? Does he have, a much more powerful gun than it appears to be? Because it really seems to just be, a regular rifle.
Or, there's the possibility of something we've seen the start of in Usopp, where maybe Yasopp imbues his bullets with something like Haki or Conqueror's Haki, depending on how powerful he is. Conqueror's Haki bullets could probably blow up ships like that.
True. And we see it, the ship is sunk, and they say it is unknown if there are any survivors, but as we've seen with Oda, especially recently, there probably are.
But in terms of checking in on another emperor who's pretty harsh in their own regard already, we're then dropped on Hachinosu on the next page, where Blackbeard is just laying into Avala Pizarro.
Yeah, and he does not want to hear any excuses. He is furious that Kobe was allowed to escape.
No, he doesn't even want the full story. He sees it as I lost an asset, that can't go unpunished. It's a very similar way of taking responsibility in that way.
Well, and he gives his reasoning just as Shanks did, being that the poneglyphs aren't obscure to the world anymore. Everyone knows about them. So they need every little bit of opportunity and advantage that they can have, and having someone like Kobe that the government wants was one of those.
Absolutely. They're kind of just playing what hand they have. The Blackbeard Pirates don't really get involved in conflicts until they feel like they know they can win. But he even expands on it on the next page, where he continues chewing him out, and he finds out you let Moria escape too. So we didn't get to any confirmation on that until now, but now we know Moria also made his way off the island.
Yep, so that's one less fruit that they get the power of as well.
And as they cut away, you do see a brief scene. It's a bit more comedic of San Juan Wolf trying to fix the damage Garf caused during his galaxy impact, but his thick ass is just knocking over more buildings. and they're yelling at him for it, but it seems like they were starting to get angry in my first interpretation, but onto the next page, no, this is a spike in morale. They are all here for Blackbeard, and now that they know more about what they're chasing, they couldn't be more convinced this is the right man to follow.
Kind of got evil Buggy vibes, where they actually messed up, but the guys are more locked in, like more trustworthy in the captain now.
And noting this, I mean, I also put a side note here, this is very unimportant, but we made a comment in our recent video on eye patches that there might not also be parrots on shoulders in the story, but there's a parrot flying around in that, so I just noted how piratey it was.
And it's Pirate Island, so it does make sense that they would have some classic tropes like that to go with it.
But Blackbeard's a smart guy. He notes this spike in morale. He calls a meeting with the Titanic captains on the island to just get a full account of everything that happened while he was gone. And he tries to kind of goad himself by also being like, all right, what's my consolation prize? And it's a hell of a consolation prize because he got Vice Admiral Garp in return.
Yeah, honestly, that's a trade up, if you ask me. And they kind of note that. They're like, it just keeps going better for him. Like, oh, you lost Kobe? Here's Garp. And speaking of Garp, Kuzan actually is pretty stoic and says that he wasn't trying to capture him. He was going for the kill.
Yeah, he just couldn't kill his former mentor even when he was trying to, which I'm getting more and more convinced Kuzan's not as good of a guy as I thought he would, but maybe that's just him saying that to Blackbeard up front to try and gain more favor with him.
Yeah, dude, honestly, him and Kizaru, just impossible to get a read on. You think you start to see some humanity in them, but then they also, they don't back down. They go through with it.
It's kind of hard to be humane against Garp, though. You see what they take just to chain him down. But just to top that off, Teach even reminds them that they were also successful in apprehending Pudding, and her latent potential for the third eye opening helping them read the poneglyphs. But there's still a Titanic captain that seems to be missing from who should be here, and that's Laffitte.
Yeah, and he has always been, to me, the most intriguing of all of Blackbeard's crew members. And it doesn't take long until we see what he's up to as we get communication between Blackbeard and him.
Yeah, you see the Demon Sheriff of the West, Laffitte, being stationed at a new place, Navy UMIT Shipping HQ, and he's able to report on the success of the revolutionaries who have not only been sabotaging the gondolas that go up and down the Red Line that bring the supplies to Marie Joie, but they've also been able to blockade most foreign supplies from even reaching this island. It's honestly kind of insane how well they've thought this out, but that's kind of why Dragon's been plotting. But as a side note, it's also just insane how consistently Laffitte gets into these places by himself.
Just lurking in the shadows all the time.
He has no partner and no trace of him anywhere he goes. Having someone that can get into anywhere is an insane asset that Blackbeard does have on his table right now. But I think we're going to see more of what Laffitte can do in the coming future because Blackbeard instructs him to be ready for his command, and that is ominous.
Yeah, very ominous. You know something's going to happen. He's going to be right in the middle of it. And, I mean, we saw them pop up in Egghead out of nowhere, but Laffitte, he could do some crazy stuff. I'm excited to see what that ends up being.
There's a lot of potential with him, and I think he'll quickly become a fan favorite as we see more of his ability. But speaking of those two Titanic captains that were present on Egghead, we begin the next page with their arrival back to Hachinosu after stealing Saturn's likeness and bringing Caribou along.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how they try to use Saturn's likeness first off. Being that they don't know that he's dead, but obviously the Gorosei do. But then we also get kind of a funny use of Pizarro's island powers being used to dock them without any effort. he seems annoyed by it, but you can tell it's very easy.
Pizarro's just funny because he likes to talk like a cat too, but he's this gigantic Goliath island picking them up out of the sea, and Caribou's freaking out in the face of this creature.
Can't really blame him.
But you're right, honestly, now that Saturn's been essentially reduced to ash and bone, by far the best asset that they got out of that island is going to be Caribou's information. And we even could see Blackbeard attacking Wano in the near future once he finds out where Pluton's supposed to be. So maybe that's going to feed into the cover series as well.
We then finish the chapter by cutting back to the Straw Hats, and we now learn that it's been 2 days since they set off from Egghead. But even with their speed and the fact that they should have been there, they've yet to arrive at Elbaf.
Yeah. With 2 days of sailing, they have not even sniffed the shores of Elbaf. This could most definitely be attributed to the absinthe that everyone got wasted on at the start of this chapter while sailing. But now the bigger question is, where did the Sunny and the rest of the crew go?
Yeah, that's kind of a big thing to go missing, is half the crew and the ship.
And you even see a brief panel in the bottom left of this page where, without the tether to the Great Eric, you see how massive some of these fishes are. And of course, Robin notes in her dark way of usual that they could have, they could have been eaten alive. And Frankie's like, "That's not even funny. That's what could be
that
real.
That could really have happened. Stop it."
But we do at least get the idea on the final page where one of those missing members has gone, being Nami, who luckily is not dead. But we also hear a voice calling out to her to wake up before she comes to in what looks like just a giant oversized Lego house, essentially.
Yeah, and I would assume that the rest of the crew is going to be there with her, that she's not just alone if the person knows her name and is calling to her. But it still begs the question of where exactly they are and why only they were taken, why the rest of the Eric wasn't as well.
As another small detail, it's interesting, she's also already adorned with some female Elbaf attire, kind of similar to what we've seen Gerd wear on the new Giant Warrior Pirates. But the fact is that every item in that room is very clearly plastic, brick by brick that you put together, and my first instinct is that some sort of giant child has taken her captive as a doll of sorts. Would not be the first time Nami's kidnapping has been an impetus for further diving into the island like Thriller Bark.
I think another very logical possibility that a lot of people have already brought up is that it could also be Loki that could possibly have a crush on her similar to how he did Lola, and that he wants to take her as a wife.
And we saw what happened when he asked Lola. She said no and rejected him. Maybe he's just not taking no as an answer this time, and he's instead taking them prisoner with no chance to be rejected.
It would also fall in kind of with what Loki is supposed to be, like a trickster god.
Absolutely. But we haven't even seen Elbaf yet. And somehow we've had the crew split again before we've even gotten onto the island, just like Egghead. Is Luffy trapped with the others? Where did the Great Eric end up sailing to? And who is it that created this massive toy structure? We'll just have to keep reading to find out, but luckily, there should be a new chapter here in the coming days.
Yes! So, we want to thank you all for watching and following along the story along with us. Comment who do you think took Nami and the others. Like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to join our growing pirate fleet. And most important of all, be crew!